Welcome back everyone to another episode. In this one we will add game states and also inputs. But before we start, don't forget to leave a like if you like this type of content and also subscribe if you don't want to miss out on any upcoming episodes. Before we start this episode, we need to fix one thing in the game loop from last update. We're checking here 4 times we're calling system nanotime. And we also only need to do it once, so let's make a new long and call it now. And every time we loop, we say now equals, take that and save it, boom. So now will always be, or we only call system nanotime once per loop. And then we will save it and then we will check for it. There we go. And just to double check if everything works. And they do. Good. Once the game loop has been improved or fixed, there is still one more thing I want to fix or change here. And it's this. If we start the game, we can see that there is sprites hiding down here that's not being shown. And that has to do with the way we set the size of the windows here. Even though the width and height are correct, they are placed a little bit badly. We're going to remove it here, and then we're going to go into game screen. And in here we add a new variable called dimension. Private. And call it size. We also import the class. And here we say size equals, and we say 640 by 640. Why you are required to make a dimension rather than just say 640, 640, I'm not entirely sure, but this is the way we need to do it. And we can make a new method called set panel size. And in here, we actually move size into here. Because it's in here we need to set it. Set minimum size to size. Set preferred size to size, and also set maximum size to size. I don't know why we can't say 640 by 640. I'm not sure, but this is the way it needs to be done. And yeah. And to get the size working, we need to add one more command, which is pack. And it's very important that we place it in the correct spot. We need to place pack after every container or content to JFrame has been added. So let's place it wrong for demonstration purposes. Like here before we add the game screen, which is a JPanel. And then we run it. Here is our game. Can't really do much. It's really important that we place it correctly after we have added all the contents or containers and whatever we have. Since we only have a one JPanel, it won't be that difficult. And what pack does, it's taking all the preferred sizes of all the contents and makes sure that the window and sets the window size for us. So if we run it now, we can move it up here and check if there is something hiding. There's nothing. Perfect. So this is the preferred way of doing it, then just set size directly. In order for us to continue this development, we need to add something very crucial. Inputs. And we can add inputs a few different ways, but we're going to make the most simplest way that I know of. So we start by going here and add a new package for all our inputs. So we have all the input classes in the same package. And then we're going to make 2 new classes, one for keyboard listener. It's going to listen for the keys on your keyboard. The nerd, that's correctly spelled. And then we have one more class for our my mouse listener. All right. And my mouse listener is going to implement 2 classes or 2 interfaces. Implements mouse listener, looking for clicks. There's 2 different ones for the mouse. One is looking for the clicks, left and right, etc. And also one that listens for motions, like moving, etc. Mouse motion listener. And since we implemented those classes or interfaces, we also need to add the methods. And there's a few different ones here. We will not use all of them, of course, but a few of them we need to use. And the same for our keyboard listener. Implements key listener. That's all we need to add. And we need to add a method, typed, pressed, and released. Yeah, pretty good. And in our game class, we're gonna add those two classes. Private my mouse listener, my mouse. And the same for our keyboard listener. All right, and in our constructor, we're gonna add a new call to a method called, no, we're not gonna do that actually. I'm just kidding. But we're gonna make a new method. Gonna make it here. That's gonna be called private void init inputs. And in our main, in our main method here, before we start the thread, we're gonna go game.init inputs. Remove that. And in here, we're going to take that one and say equals new my mouse listener. And the same for keyboard. All right. And to add those or these inputs to the window, we say add mouse listener, my mouse listener. Add mouse motion listener, my mouse listener, because this class, my mouse listener, implements both of those two interfaces. And back here, and also for our keyboard. That listens for key inputs. And then we're gonna say request focus. The purpose of the request focus is to get the focus on this particular component. But since we only have two, we have the J-frame and the J-panel, it won't be too much of an issue. This is just to make sure that we don't have any weird bugs coming up later. So we're gonna add request focus for J-frame to have the focus of all the inputs that we give it. And to test if our listeners work, we can start with a keyboard listener. We simply make a simple if statement here. If E, the event we get when we press something, get key code. Every key on your keyboard has a specific code, and we check if that key code matches a certain one. Event.vacant A. If it's A, we say system.out.println. We do something simple like A is pressed. And we can check another key as well, just to be on the safe side, so we don't just B. So we don't get any false. Else if, of course. Save, and we can do the same for our mouse. We can just check for clicked. If we click something, if e.getButton is equal to mouse button 1, which is the left button, we say system.out.println left clicked. And we can also check our right mouse button. Whoa, where did I go? There. Come back. There we go. Else if button 2. I think that's the right one. It could be the middle one. We'll see. You get mouse button 2. We'll see. We'll see if it's the middle one or the right one. Let's run the program, or run the game. Left mouse button works. Okay, that was the middle one, so it's actually button 3 is the right one. Try it again. Yeah. So right button, left mouse button works. We're gonna trust the keyboard. Pressing A, pressing S, pressing D, pressing F, J, G, H, J, and B. Oops, did I not spell it correctly? There we go. We can quit and try it again. B, yeah, B, A. Yeah, so our listeners works. That's perfect. And now when we got the inputs working, we're gonna add something called an enum class. We go into our main package, new enum. And this is sort of a special GameStates, we're gonna call it. Enum is a special class that we can have that stores constant values. So depending on what constant is currently active, we're gonna draw a different scene. So we're just gonna set some basic ones here. And the way you write enums a little bit different than how you write classes. So we're gonna say we will have a playing, we will have a menu, and we will have a settings. There could be more, but for now we're just gonna keep those. We're gonna have a public static GameStates equals menu. We're gonna start with menu, and we also need to do so. So now when we go into our game, or rather game screen, we are also going to make a new class called render. In here we will have all the rendering taken care of. And it will be, when we add something new, we will add it inside this class to be rendered. Public render, game screen. And we will need the game screen class to be imported here. Game screen, and then this dot game screen equals game screen. Yes, and it also needs a public void render. And render needs to take in the graphics class. G. Import. And inside our render method, we're gonna add something called a switch that is kind of like a big if statements, but it can do several brackets or more than one brackets at the same time, depending on what input. But we're gonna check for the current game state. And depending on which state is currently in, we're gonna draw a different scene. In case the menu, playing, and case settings. We're also gonna add a break. If we don't add a break, but after each, then we will draw them all. And we don't want that. So in case it's the menu menu state, we're gonna draw whatever in here. If it's the playing in here and setting, we're gonna draw whatever in here. The next thing we need to do is to move a lot of code around. We're gonna go into our game screen first of all, and in our paint component, or rather, no, before we actually need to make a private render. Gonna initialize the render by render equals new render. I'm gonna give it this class because it needs the game screen. And in here we're gonna remove a lot of code, or move a lot of code, so we can take one at a time, I guess. We're gonna remove the load sprites in here. We're gonna do it at the bottom. We're gonna let's move that over here. We can remove this get random color. We don't use that anymore really. Get random integer, we still need. And then we take this section right here where we draw the screen. And in the menu, we're gonna paste it. Perfect. And back here, we're gonna remove that one and go in here. load sprites. We have sprites, yes. And we're gonna take this array, but also this image. Come on, place it there, and then we copy that one and place it up here. Perfect. Random we need as well. We're just gonna make a quick one. Private random. We're also gonna initialize it. Random equals new random. There we go. And we also need to import the class. There we go. I don't think, the image we can remove. And in here, I think we're gonna need it later. So we're just gonna go game, and then say this dot game equals game. And we also need a private game. And we don't need random in here anymore. And we can remove that as well. It's a lot cleaner in here, because we don't want too much junk in here. And we're not quite done yet. We need to go in our game class, and instead of the image, we're gonna give it this class. We will remove the image. We will, wherever we load the image, import the image, we're gonna take this method from game and also move it to the render class. And in here, we're gonna say, after random, import the image. And in game, we can remove the import image. There should be something more, correct? We can remove all of this. Don't need it anymore. Here's some handy notes. Update game, no. And in here, I think that's good enough for now. I think everything should work. They don't. And why is that? That's because in game screen, we never call the class that renders everything now. So we still call super paint component, and then we call render. So everything in here will be where we render things. So let's try it now then. Everything looks normal. Perfect. All right, well now everything is working. We're gonna make a new package with scenes in it. Well, we're gonna call it scenes. And if we only use the render class for everything that needs to be rendered, this would be turned into several hundred lines of code just for this render method. And that's very messy. So we're gonna have one scene for menu, playing, and also settings. We're gonna start with menu. So in our source folder here, we're gonna make a new package, and we're gonna call it scenes. And in scenes, we will add two new special classes, kinda. And one will be a super class, and one will be an interface. So in here, we're gonna say new class, and we're gonna call it game scene. And this game scene will be the super class, if you wanna call it, or the parent class for all the scenes we have. And for now, this game scene will only have a constructor, public scene, and it will take in a game class, or the game class, and then we'll say private game. This dot game equals game. And then we need to import it, of course. So everything we have in the game scene superclass will be available to all the child classes. So we will also add a public game get game in case we have some child classes to the child classes and they need to get to the game class. Return game. And we will also make a interface. And it will all be obvious why we have this later on, but for now we're just gonna add it and you're gonna see what use they have. And this interface we will call scene methods. It looks a little bit different. Instead of saying class, it says interface, and we don't need any constructor or anything. We're just gonna decide what type of methods all scenes need to implement. So they will have a render, and this render needs a graphics G, and that's enough. And we also need to public void render, obviously. And they also need to import this one. And in case we need more methods, here, 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 and they will all be added to the scenes that we have. Or using an interface is just a very good way of making sure that when you're developing and all of a sudden you realize, hey, I need this method in all of my scenes. Instead of going in manually and maybe you forget in one of the scenes, you just go into the interface and type in the new method that will be needed in all scenes. And in case you forget it, you're going to get an error saying you didn't implement all the methods. So this is just a good way of making sure that you get everything that you need. And with our super method and also our interface, we can start adding the scenes to our class or to our package. So we're going to make the menu. We're going to make play. And we're also going to make the settings. And we can start in the menu, and here we will say extends game scene. That was the game scene. That was the super class or parent class, depending on how you want to phrase it. And we need to add a constructor. So it takes in the game class and it sends it to the game scene to be stored. So you can store a lot of variables here, but they will all be available to every class that extends the game scene. And we also made an interface, so we need to implement that the interface, and it was called scene methods. And then we add unimplemented methods, and now we got the render. So in case we want to add some more methods, but we're not sure if we have added them into the scenes or whatever, we just go in our interface and say public void. If it's a void, it could be something that returns an integer or anything, but void call me. Boom. And now when we added it, we get an error message. Add unimplemented methods. And that's the way we do it to make sure that we get everything that needs to be implemented in every scene. And back to our menu here, and we're gonna do the same for all the other classes as well. Playing and settings. There we go. Just make some room. We need to change a little bit, I realized. So if we go into our game screen, we're not gonna make the render class in here. So we're gonna take those, remove them into game. And in here we will have private render, and we will also initialize it. And render will take a game instead of game screen. It's my bad, but coding and talking at the same time can sometimes be a bit confusing. Game equals game. Alright, that should work so far. Perfect. And then in game screen we simply we go to game class, and down here we're gonna make a little bit of text and say getters and setters. Just something I like to have. And in here we will have public render get render. Return render. Perfect. So render, it's initialized here, and then we go to game screen and say not render but game.get render.render. Yes, that's how we're gonna do it. Because in here we will have all classes. And we will have initialized the private menu, private playing, and private, what was the last one? Settings. And we need to import. They had something called menu, okay. Be sure to not import the wrong one, because apparently there was something called java.avt that had a menu, but we're only gonna import the one we made, scenes, from scenes. So be sure to import the correct one. And you know what? We can make a little class here to make it, or a method to make it easier. Init classes. Just something I like to have, otherwise this section here is going to be so large. And where did we put it? Init classes, boom. Then we're going to have menu equals new menu, this. And you know the deal with playing and setting is the same way here. Good. And down here below the render, get render, we're gonna go up here and say source, generate getters and setters. And we're gonna click menu, playing, setting. And we're gonna get getters and setters. We don't really need the setters, so we're gonna remove those and only keep the getters. There we go. And to tie all of this together, we go back to our render class, and in here we will once again remove it and place it in our menu class. And we will also take the import image, load sprites, and get random int. And we will place them in our menu here at the bottom. And from render, we will also take those two into menu, load and import. From render, we will take the random imager there at those as well. We won't use this way of rendering for so much longer, but this is just a way of seeing if it works. And why are you giving? All right, we need to take that as well. Go in our menu. Import images. I think everything looks fine. Testing it right now. It's white. Why? Because we are in the menu, but we don't say game.get menu.render. So if we try it now, everything works. Perfect. And the last part of this episode will be to be able to switch between the states, and that we will do that with our inputs that we implemented in the beginning. So we'll say get playing.render, and in settings we will say game.getSettings.render. We're currently starting in the menu, but let's add some code here. We'll say g.set color, set the base color, color.red, and we will I don't know, let's make a square, just a square. G.fill rect 00 640 640. So this will be the entire screen. And in settings, let's go playing, and in settings we'll do the same, but we'll go blue rectangle. So the menu scene will have the images, the playing scene will for now have the red square or the red background, and the settings will have the blue background. And the way we switch between the states, for now we don't have any in-game buttons or anything, so we will just use the keyboard for now, very basic. We'll make another else if, so we're gonna have A, S, S is pressed, and then D, ASD. And instead of this shouting, we will say GameStates equal menu. Let's see if I remember correctly without looking it up. Import static main.GameStates. I think that should work. Yes, it does. This I could just make it look like so. Then I specifically import just the menu, but by doing so, I import everything. And cool that I remembered it. Usually that is done automatically. So for S, we go playing. And for D, we go settings, view. So now everything should work. And let's see if we can switch the states. It's very basic now. We will add buttons, obviously, and then a graphic user interface so we can move around. This is just to show that our game states, inputs, and everything is tied together for this episode. Starting out in the menu, usually do that in every game. We're testing A. Because we are in the menu, we don't change anything. We click S. Now in playing for now. And now we press D, so in settings. So in a game, we would start here and then we click play game, or play game, and poof, now we're in the game scene. And then maybe you pause, go back to menu, and then you click settings to change some settings, and now we're here. Now everything works just the way we want. Perfect. And if you have gotten this far, I want to say good job, and I promise you that the episodes that are to come will be a lot more interesting. Right now we're just taking care of the backbone, the logics, things you don't really see, but needs to be done behind the scenes in order for everything to run smoothly. We're taking care of the engine. Now we're gonna polish the game and add something that actually is a game. So good job thus far, and keep it up. That is all for this episode. I hope you learned something in this one. And if you have, don't forget to leave a like. And if you don't want to miss out on the next episode, click the subscribe button. It really helps out the channel. Until the next episode, I wish you all a great day, and you take care now, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.